what is up, you guys? Welcome back to the Capitalized Podcast, where we help investors build wealth in real estate. I'm your host, Grant Smith, and as always, this podcast is sponsored by our hard money lending company, Sharper Capital Partners, based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. If you want to learn how to use hard money to build and scale your real estate investment portfolio, you can visit us at sharpercapitalpartners.com. All right, on this episode, I am super excited to welcome Josh Janus to the show. This will be our second stab at this, considering, some technical difficulties in the last round. So I appreciate you, Josh, being here. Josh is a real estate investor and a real estate agent servicing the Columbus and Northern Ohio markets. Josh was a college student, chose to not pursue going all the way through school, instead pursuing real estate full time. And so we're going to get into all the details that were associated with that decision, what he's currently doing today, and how he made the transition to become in that position full time. So without further ado, Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So to start off, why don't you tell us what your current focus is, professionally, personally, and then, we'll get back into how you got to where you are today.
Definitely. Yeah. Right now, my main focus is to scale up to 100 units by the end of the year. So I'm doing that through BRRRRs, doing some fix and flips to get some more capital to 1031 into some bigger deals, so I don't have 100 single families. And as an agent, I'm going to try to do between 150 and 200 deals for selling properties to clients. And those are kind of my main focuses right now as an agent and an investor.
So for a little context here, why don't you go ahead and explain to the audience, your age, how long you've been doing this for, because that's a significant amount of transaction volume for anybody, but especially given how short your time horizon has been to get there.
Yeah. I have been in the real estate space now for about 2 years, and I'm 22, going to be turning 23 in a couple of months, but yep.
All right. Terrific. So let's back it up. However far you want to go back, pick a point in time where, real estate first began to pique your interest and where you currently were at your point in life when that was going on.
Definitely. Yeah. So I was a college student. I came home to go to community college, and I was just driving for DoorDash and Uber, listening to different podcasts, trying to figure out what to do. I was studying computer science, but I didn't really know. I wasn't dead set on that path. I was going down it, but I wasn't super passionate on it. I had some money saved from some previous entrepreneurial activities that I had done in high school, selling shoes, selling duct tape wallets, flipping virtual currency a little bit. So I wanted to figure out how I can make that money work for me to maybe create some passive income. And I came across real estate as a whole. And then that led me towards BRRRR, which is a really good resource for new investors. And through there, I was able to kind of explore the real estate space and carve my little niche in it.
So when you first got started down this process, I'm assuming working multiple jobs, you were still in school at the time, right? What did your commitment look like? How did you get traction at the beginning? So like from you're getting educated on what you were doing, but then, what tangible actions were you taking to, get towards purchasing a property if that was your goal, or becoming an agent if that was your goal?
For sure. My first goal was the house hack. So after listening to some podcasts, driving DoorDash and doing things like that, I met Remington Lyman, who is the broker at Reefco Real Estate in Columbus, Ohio. He was going to help me find a house hack while I was going to Ohio State University the next year. That was going to be my path. And I came into his office, kind of saw the environment, what was going on. And I was like, maybe like going full-time real estate or being an agent. I don't know. I was kind of like entertaining the idea for a bit. And he started showing me how to find off-market deals, how to source deals on your own, how to cold call, do all things like that. And I basically went from just listening to podcasts while doing DoorDash to doing like DoorDash and cold calling 50-50 to dropping DoorDash altogether, and then eventually dropping school. That was kind of the path in the beginning.
So while you're doing this, at what point do you decide, okay, maybe computer science in college isn't the best path forward, and instead I should be going more towards this real estate thing?
Yeah. So I was around 6 to 9 months into it, and I had closed a couple deals. I had built up a pretty good pipeline of sellers and buyers that weren't necessarily ready to do something now, but they were ready to make a move in the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months. So I started to put some deals in contract, ran the numbers like every agent does, 3% of whatever it is. And I started to make basically every month what I would be making as a computer scientist, whatever position I would get from that major in college. And I was like, this is better. So I decided to do this full time.
Yeah, that's always a pleasant surprise when the math just works out. It's like, well, if it's strictly a numbers game, this is probably my best path forward. What did your process look like in the beginning? Obviously, you were being coached, and mentored, whatever you want to call it, through the process. But for people who are looking to get started, what tangible steps did you take early on that allowed you to build that pipeline?
For sure. So like the very first thing that I got into was the concept of learning what a deal is, right? Everybody has their own definition of what a deal is. So you kind of have to learn what that means. And the best way that I found to learn that is just by cold calling. So, and even before that, right? Part of cold calling is you have to pull lists of, I don't know, duplexes in a certain area. You're going to have all the owners for all the addresses. And then the key part is you got to get their phone numbers, right? So the first thing was I learned how to get their phone numbers through a bunch of different resources. And once I learned how to do that, I hit the phones, and through consistent cold calling, 20, 30, 40 hours a week, I was able to, learn how to talk real estate, right? That's a big thing. Learn how to get the information needed, learn people's motivations, whether they're looking to do something, whether they're not looking to do something. And I think a really good like side effect of this is if you really try to meet some of the people you're calling, some of the investors that have a lot of units, if they see you're eager, right, and you're getting after it and you're trying to learn, you can meet some of them in person and they're willing to help you because they knew that when they started, they didn't have a ton of guidance either.
All great pieces of advice there. So I want to get into the actual, tacit knowledge here, because I think a lot of people that might demystify the process, especially if they're getting started. Like, you're 22 years old, you're having great success very early on. People, who no matter where they're at in their career, they would love to have that kind of success in a period of time that you did. So in terms of like process, going and getting a list of all the duplexes in a geographic area, any tips for where you go to grab that list?
Definitely. So I use PropStream. That's basically just here's an example. 2 units in 43212. That's a zip code in Grandview Heights, which is in Columbus. It's a really nice area. I pulled that list and then I was like, hey, let's make sure that the people that own it have at least owned it for 3 years. And because of the price points over there, I wanted to make sure that those people paid at the very most $300,000 or less. And after filtering all that, maybe you have a list of 200 to 300 people or properties. And then once you have that, right, then the next thing you're going to do is start skip tracing. Some of the resources that I use to skip trace is websites like Fast People Search. You can, like, if the property is owned in the person's name, you can just search the person's name and the city, and you're going to get a list of phone numbers for different people. Try to line up their mailing address for the property as the same mailing address for the person on Fast People Search, and you can start plugging in those numbers. It can get a little bit more complicated as properties are starting to be owned by businesses. I can explain roughly that process as well if you'd like, but overall, it's the same concept: pulling phone numbers, adding it to the list, and then the goal is to try to connect with all those owners.
So yeah, let's get into that, because obviously a lot of property right now is being owned in a business entity. So walk through your process for getting around some of the hurdles and even agent registries, like we talked about in the past.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to start out with the most complicated example because it's going to explain all the layers that you have to go through in almost any instance to get their phone number. So let's say it's owned in an LLC, right? I don't know. It's Greater Properties LLC or something. And what you're going to do is you can go to a website like opencorporates.com where it has public business data. And on there, you just search it, make sure it's in the same state that you're in. Sometimes people file LLCs in other states, but just try to make sure it lines up. Another thing you can do is you can see when the LLC was created and then match that kind of when the property was purchased in that LLC. If those match up, it's probably the right thing. On there, you're going to have your agent and your incorporator. So sometimes it doesn't always show the incorporator, but that's what you care about, is the incorporator on there. So let's say on the incorporator, it's like One example would be Neiman Law LLC. That is a law firm in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm from. So that person that owns that company decided to have Neiman Law represent them and basically submit the business documents and be the agent and incorporator for them. So their name is not going to show up on there. So you have to go one layer deeper. The next layer deep that you can go is you can go to, I'm in Ohio, so I'm going to go to Ohio Business Search. And then it's just like a government or state website. You can search the LLC that way. You can actually get the actual documents that were signed, like the articles of organization, different things related to the entity setup. And on there, you can kind of scroll down. You can see who signed on behalf of the company. Sometimes it'll be the person right there, right? That's what you're looking for if it's not the same as the lawyer. But if it still says the lawyer there, then you got to go another layer because these people did a really good job of hiding themselves. The next thing you're going to want to do is go to the county that the property is located in. So in Columbus, it's Franklin County. So I'm going to search the Franklin County Recorder. And in there, that's where all of like the major documents are stored relating to real property, mortgages, deeds, liens, anything like that. They're going to be there. So you can search the mortgage. So in almost any instance, a mortgage has to have a guarantor or the person signing on behalf of it. And that is usually going to be an individual, not a company. So you can search on there. So what you want to do, you go back to the property and you want to pull the parcel ID, right? It's probably somewhere at the top. And you search the parcel ID in the recorder and you would want to go to the most recent mortgage pulled on that property. And if the date lines up with when it was recently transferred, that's it. And then you open it up. It's going to be like 20 to 50 pages, depending on how long it is. Go to the back, all the way at the end. Going to go past like the notary pages. Then after that, you'll get to where the person actually signed on behalf of the mortgage. So like right there, it's going to say whatever their name is, Dave Smith. And you're like, man, that's a different name than what I've been seeing in all these other layers. That's your guy. So then you want to search that guy, right? Maybe look at the mailing address of the LLC, the mailing address of the property, and just search Dave Smith in that area. And that's probably his phone number.
An absolute masterclass right there. Obviously, we covered a lot of information there very quickly. You can tell this is not Josh's first time doing this. So don't expect to, whoever's listening to this, don't expect to be able to do this just off the top of your head. Go step by step. The biggest thing is, you are trying to identify who owns this property. You're going through Fast People Search to do the skip tracing or some form of that. And then you're doing some sort of finding out the entity information if necessary, and finding the people who own that entity if it's a registered business entity. So again, that is just such great detail. So you're taught this process at a very early stage in terms of your investing career, and talk about how you got your first property and then how you've been scaling in both your brokerage or your agency side and your investment portfolio since then.
For sure. So first off, I've seen successful investors that are agents also, and I've also seen successful investors that are not agents. So full disclosure, you don't have to be an agent to be a successful investor if that's your goal. I chose the agent route because it made the most sense for me. But basically, the first deal that I sold was from a list that I was cold calling in 43212. I found a guy that had a 4-unit, right? And he wanted to sell. I got all the information, rents, lease terms, roof condition, some pictures, all that, presented that to an investor, got it in contract, and then that closed. That was the first deal. And basically I closed somewhere between 10 and 20 deals like that as an agent. And I built up a good amount of capital. And then I found a deal on the market in Cleveland, and it made sense as a BRRRR. So I just took out some hard money, renovated it, and refinanced about 6 months later. And that was my first BRRRR. And I've been doing a bunch of those ever since.
Now, when you're doing these BRRRRs, are you pulling out a large portion of your equity when you're doing that? Like, are you able to pull out your down payment, or are you leaving some cash in these deals?
So a lot of the first ones I did, I actually was using private money for the down payments also. So I was leveraged, a funny quote I like to use, up to my eyeballs for a lot of those. Because I don't know, I was just learning, trying to have fun. Uh, my goal was basically just to refinance, pay everybody back, and then have the property for free. So I was able to do that for the first six, I think.
Got you. Yeah, that again, that is just super impressive. Basically, you know, OPM, like you said, leveraged at the gills, but ended up with the property just in your sole name at the end of the day. When it comes to managing these relationships that you're building, I think something that might be helpful for people is obviously as an agent, there's a way that you maintain your relationships, and maybe that's how you use that same sort of, philosophy when it comes to, or strategy or process when it comes to managing your investor relations. Maybe just talk about like, okay, what software, what processes do you have in place to make sure that you're keeping in front of all of those contacts that you have?
Definitely. So when you're starting out, you probably don't have that big of a network and you don't have that many connections. So what I suggest, even like if you're working with buyers, right? Just like sellers, you're always going to call them, follow up every week or two. Do the same thing with your buyers. Get in the habit of following up. In the beginning, I was kind of over following up and I was maybe annoying some people, but that way I learned kind of the respectful boundaries on what makes sense to get to where they're actually going to do something, whether buy, sell, whatever. And the software I use is Follow Up Boss. I think really any CRM probably works. It has more to do with how you're using it than what it provides. I mean, I'm just using basic tasks. When let's say I onboard a client, right? And I talk to them, get them all ready to go to invest. Their next step is to get applied or get a pre-approval with the lender. I'm going to put a task in 3 days. Hey, did you get a chance to reach out to the lender? Then I have another text template for 2 days after that, and then another one after that. But I think a really big thing is just always follow up and then try to figure out like an excuse for why you're following up. That's the hardest part in the beginning, is like, I'm going to call this guy again, but like, what am I going to say, or what is going on here? And, some of the things you can do, you can just ask some questions. Something that I learned like in the beginning was like, just ask people, how did they get this property? Right. I see you own this one and the one down the street. Like, how'd you get both of those? You're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn little tidbits, especially about your market versus markets in general, that will pay off.
Terrific advice right there. I can say that even from the lending side, um, when you're not trying to pester clients in any way, shape, or form. If anything, you're trying to build a relationship. So figuring out how to build a relationship, even if it's through the phone, which is, in a lot of ways is very different than meeting them in person. As soon as you meet someone in person, like you said, if you can get in front of them, the relationship just seems to open up completely. But okay, so we've talked about how you first got started, your first properties, the BRRRR deals you did. Talk a little bit about the scope, like where are you at now portfolio wise, and the acquisitions that you took to get there.
For sure. I'll say one thing real quick, kind of leading up to that. I find deals, right? That's what people would say. Where do you find deals? I find them from 5 sources. So I find them from the market, like everybody else does. I find them from pocket listings. So one thing I do is I have my assistants pull a list of all of the listing agents that have active multifamily listings in my market, and they're going to call them once a month, and they're going to ask, hey, do you have any other properties off market? Or they're going to look at that property that's listed. They're going to search that in the auditor and see if that owner has anything else. And they're going to ask that listing agent, hey, I see your guy owns this also. Would you consider an offer on that? I found a lot of deals that way, right? And that's kind of in front of you. You just got to go out and grab it. I'll also find them from cold calling or training people to cold call and kind of working the warmish leads that they've found. That's number 3. Number 4 is I'll find them from wholesaler lists, right? Just try getting every darn list you can. Go on Facebook. Okay, this is like shaky advice, but just accept it. Put your email in every darn Facebook group that you can find in your market. Like wholesalers that are hustling, man, they're going to add you to our list. Unfortunately, you're going to get a lot of scam, a lot of garbage. Just kind of sift through that. But like, you just need one deal, one wholesaler to add you to their list, and it makes all that worth it. That's another tip where you can find a lot of deals. Number 5 is I work in an office with 20 other weird guys like me, and we pass deals around. So I find deals from them too. So that's kind of where I'm finding the deals that I'm buying there, all of those. And the same thing with what I'm helping my clients buy. So for me personally, I just have been doing BRRRRs for the most part in Cleveland and Columbus. I have 2 Cleveland contractor crews and 1 Columbus contractor crew. Right now, everybody's doing about 2 or 3 projects each. So that's like 6 to 9 at the same time. And I'm just learning how to bookkeep all that, right? And make sure that there's enough margin when you're buying them. Make sure you got your financing lined up. You got to know when your hard money debt's up. It's kind of a lot to manage, but that's seems to be one way that you can scale when you don't have a ton of cash up front.
There's so many points to elaborate on there. First and foremost, thank you for diving into those ways that you're finding your deals, because I think that demystifies a lot of the, it not demystifies, but it also provides a lot of perspective on where your deals are coming from. You talked about assistants. Are these virtual assistants, or are these people that, are in your office with you?
Yeah, I mean, virtual assistants. So I have some in-person assistants now, but I mean, I was able to scale up to doing 20 deals a month with just virtual assistants. So it's doable.
20 deals a month. Is that both your own deals, or is that, when I say your own deals, properties that you're fixing and flipping, or properties that you're acquiring yourself, or do those also include deals for your agency?
Both, like a combination. Yeah.
Got you. Yeah, no, that's awesome. When you talked about, let's see here, I think you mentioned a little bit about running these contracting crews. Are these crews that, like, do you have a legal entity that is like a contracting company, and then you're basically running a construction contracting business? Or is this like companies that you just reliable crews that you consistently work with?
A lot of these are just literally just general contractors that they have their own crews, and I just pay them to do the project. And then I communicate with them, give them the bids or the bid payments, do things like that. So, yeah.
Got you. No, that makes perfect sense. Just wanted to clarify if it was like your own business entity that was like hiring or 1099 these employees, let's say, or if it was more so like crews that you'd identify that are good, consistent to work with, and getting those done. So I'm assuming that you're running these crews not only for your own properties, but probably for some of your investors too, perhaps.
Yeah. I have like 5 different crews in both markets, and I use them and my clients use them. It's kind of mixed up.
Got you. Yeah, really, really good insight there. Any tips on identifying good contractors?
Oh yeah. So you this is kind of iffy, but it's a good way of picking up contractors. You can go on the MLS and look at properties that need rehabbed, and you can call the listing agents. Now, it's got to be something you're legitimately interested in, or this isn't my advice. You could do it if you're not, but be like, hey, I'm interested in that property. I don't have any good general contractors to walk through for a bid. You got somebody? There you go. Probably found like 10 that way.
Got you. I think that's great advice. Some of the things that we do both on the lending side, but when we do our own deals as well, we're looking at properties and we'll always ask the contractors that we are working with if we can see examples of their work, either photos or actually go walk a property that they've completed themselves. And that saved us a lot of heartache, because there were some people that we worked with on our side where we're like, hey, they need to do crown molding, like A+ finishes. This is like going to be, a house that's well above the median first time home buyers price range, right? Someone who's looking for like an upgrade. And then you'll see photos of a contractor who's never done any work like that. They've done just like, what you could consider like a C-class finish, right? So I think, that advice that you gave of getting your eyeballs on a lot of contractor references, and then just doing your due diligence from there.
Yep. Yeah.
So, okay, so you got your crews. You've scaled this all up in such a short period of time. Like, and I want to reiterate that. I mean, from the time you became an agent, which was what year did you become an agent?
The beginning of 22.
Okay, and total transaction volume in your first year was roughly what?
Like 125, something like that.
That's insane. Yeah, that's just crazy. I mean, those numbers, are those all your listings? Like, those are all your listings. Those aren't like are you sharing some of those listings, or what's the deal there?
No, I'm an independent agent. So I was either the buyer rep or the seller rep there.
Yeah. So for anyone who's listening, I mean, that's, that is such an anomaly. So just want to again reiterate how impressive that is. And I think there's a lot to be learned about how quickly you figured out the process. And something that we skipped over, but we actually talked about in the last conversation we had was, you, by the time that you became an agent, you had been already working some investor relationships leads. So by the time that you became an agent, you kind of hit the ground running with maybe like a 6-month backlog of relationships that you'd already built up. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah, I was basically engaging with all these leads that weren't ready to do anything now, but they were ready to do something maybe in 6, 12, 18 months. And agents or investors don't really pay attention to those people very much. So if you are their best friend and you hold their hand through that entire time frame, they're probably going to use you.
Got you. Yeah, no, again, great wisdom there. So when someone is going about scaling as fast as you've done it, what are the biggest challenges that you had to overcome in order to go from basically zero to, okay, 125 million in transactions or whatever it may be?
Yeah. Do you want me to do agent side or investor side?
Start with agency side, and then we'll go to investor side.
All right. Agency side, best advice I can give if you're trying to be a high producing agent is take a notepad, put it next to you, and every stupid little thing you do throughout the day, because as an agent, you do so many things, write it down. Whether it's like, I followed up with the lender about an appraisal. I asked my client if they wanted to see this property. Every little thing. At the end of the day, it's going to be 100 items on there. Review them, set like an hour or 30 minutes at the end of every single day to review it and figure out what you can combine, what tasks you can combine. Maybe you did the same category of thing 10 times throughout the day and you condense it where you only do that once. That saves a bunch of time. Or you can write a procedure for it if it's something that's repeatable and delegate it. Many of the things that you're doing as an agent have the ability to be delegated. When I say that, I mean, hire a virtual assistant, teach them how to do it. So like an example is like pulling rental comparables for a property I'm trying to market to sell, right? I showed a VA how to do that a year ago and I haven't pulled a rent comp since then, right? That's saved hours and hours and hours. And there's little tasks like that add up. That helps a ton as an agent. As an investor scaling up, I mean, man, there's a lot of like things that pop up: financing, contracting, bookkeeping. Like I mean, something I could say is like, let's say you have no units, build a system that can handle 10 units. And then let's say you're at 5, build a system that can handle 25. Like always be multiple steps ahead so that when the wave does come, you can handle it. That's kind of a high level advice, but I hope that helps.
No. Again, I'll give an example of just from my side of things, because that is such true advice. We just pulled the trigger on a new loan origination software for the hard money lending business. It can handle up to 400 loans with one portfolio manager. We have another competitor in market, and that's the exact same advice he gave us. I was like kind of dragging my feet about pulling the trigger on some sort of software to help us scale our business. And he's like, yeah, if there's anything I would have done, I would have bought that software sooner. And roughly our loan portfolio size will be very similar to what his is in 2 years, and he's been in it for 10 or 15. So point being is like, I think that advice that you just said right there resonated with me personally, but I think hopefully it resonates with everyone else out there, because as soon as your system bottlenecks, all the other processes don't really matter because you can't really take on any more inventory, whether it's your portfolio or clients you're servicing, things of that nature. So again, I just think that is really good advice. So on the topic of your processes for managing your portfolio of real estate, I mean, again, 22 years old, what does your team look like around you to help you manage that portfolio? How many units do you currently have, roughly right now? And what's it have to look like to get to that 100 plus that you're talking about?
Yeah, my team is me, 2 virtual assistants, and the different contracting crews, and one property manager for Cleveland and one property manager for Columbus. That's it. So use spreadsheets. I have one big spreadsheet that's got like what I paid for the property, what lender, what's the debt, what day did I buy it, when does the loan mature. I have like a date next to like the status of the unit, like when I'm renovating it. So like today I actually went through this morning and I went through every item. I was like, this one's getting leased out. This one, oh, window busted, replace the window. This one, like the tenant moved out, needs to turn, right? So like set up a system where you're reviewing everything every week or something like that. I've seen that from guys that own way more real estate than me. That's all they really do. Trying to think what else. Another thing too that helps is build out like a bunch of small pipelines that produce like one deal a month or two or something. It's like that example I gave earlier, following up with all agents that have multifamily listings. That's probably going to produce you a deal every month or two, right? Think of just little creative things like that. Set up 20 of those things. So now you have 20 things kicking out a deal every month or two. And then next thing you know, right, if you only got one property, you have way more deals than what you can handle. And then you can go on to the next problem, which is financing, contracting, etc. But that, just think of like a road with like 4 different lanes. You got like financing in one, deal sourcing in one, contracting in one, management in one, and like go one by one and try to extend the amount of volume each one can handle, and they'll all kind of follow it.
In regards to the portfolio that you have outstanding currently, how are you using any software to manage those, like like a Rent Ready or anything like that, in terms of like collecting tenant payments, all that good stuff?
I actually just outsource it to a property management company, so I eat the 10% every month. I am going to hire someone for Cleveland as soon as I get 100 units, but not yet.
Okay, that's awesome. So in terms of and not only are you BRRRRing out of these properties, but you're also going to use a property management company to basically take a lot of that heavy lifting off of yourself. That's just awesome. That's awesome. I mean, that's everyone's dream. And I think the secret that you have here is private capital obviously is important. The other piece that's really important is how good of the deals that you are getting. And I'm genuinely curious, like what kinds of returns are you looking for on your properties? You said, everyone obviously has an idea of what a deal looks like, but it does help to understand what people view as a deal. So from your perspective, when you're looking at a property, what does a deal look like to you? When do you pull a trigger on a property as opposed to say, hey, maybe I'll just help you list it?
Yeah. I mostly what I'm doing is BRRRRs. So I would like to get out of the property what I'm putting into it and like gross equity before like the fee to sell it and holding costs and stuff like that. So like an example would be a duplex that I'm buying for 80, that I'm gonna put 40 into. I want it to be worth 160 when it's done. And then, right, you're going to have like your holding costs and sell fees. So you're not like, if I sell it, I'm not going to make 40K, but that's kind of my buy box for BRRRRs because I want to hold them.
Got you. Yeah, no, that's terrific. Are these things, I mean, it sounds like, obviously I'm assuming these properties are cash flowing even after property management, or are they like at break even with, future potential rents? Like, I guess it just depends on the deal, but like, will you purchase a property if it breaks even with property management just because you have equity and it'll appreciate over time? Or what's your thought process there?
I'll do that if it's in a good area, A class, B class. But a lot of them buying C class and it actually cash flows pretty well. So like at the end, so I'm fine with that.
Yeah, no, that's again, it's always helpful to understand where people are approaching the deal from, because I think a lot of people don't, like you said, they don't know what a deal is, or what's a deal to someone is completely different to someone else, where someone might be happy leaving 40K in the deal if they're going to cash flow like crazy. Whereas, in your sense, you're like, I want to put all my money out and then still cash flow in a C class area, but in a A or B class area, I want to do, if it's just break even, as long as it's going to appreciate, I'm happy with that too. So again, it's just very insightful to know, like, where you're coming at from that perspective. Here's another thing that I think is important to talk about. You're young, you're in real estate. It can work to your advantage, but it can also be work to your disadvantage. Like, you're helping some people sell some of the assets that are the most value to them. How do you overcome that hurdle when working with listing properties for people who, it might be their biggest financial asset?
I guess I took more of a commercial agent approach and applied it to the residential side when I'm trying to get listings or getting a seller to work with me, especially in the beginning. So when I say that, right, give them like a full like CMA, right? A full report of what their property is worth, all of it, make it look pretty and give it to them. A lot of agents just call them and they're like, hey, I'll send you a listing agreement if you want to get 350 for it or something. Like, try to separate yourself when it comes to preparation. I think that helps a lot when you're younger or if you're newer.
Yeah, that's great advice there. So that's a really good point, because if you think about it, you have to do something that's a little bit unique. I don't know how many real estate agents there are in the Columbus market, but I know here in Cincinnati, like probably over the United States, it's just extremely saturated with people who have their license but don't really use it. So finding any unique way to differentiate yourself is going to be important in that situation. Another thing that I wanted to kind of talk about and maybe get into a little bit is, what does and you might laugh, but what does the work-life balance look like? What is your time commitment to these various components of your business? And then, like, what do you got going on outside of that?
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was just work 90 hours a week, get up early. I still get up early, but it was 6, 7 days a week, 8, 10+ hour days. So that's kind of what it took for the first 6 to 9 months to really get this ship moving. And now that I have a couple things going, I'm pretty much like 12 hours every day, Monday through Friday. And then Saturday, Sunday, I am not working. So that's the way that I do it now.
All right. Awesome. Awesome to hear that. And you do have a lot of autonomy at the same time, like those 12 hours that you do work, right? You you do have a degree because you do work for yourself, right? I mean, you're working in your own business essentially, even though you're an agent and you have your investment business. But so lay out the roadmap. You're going to 100 units. Obviously, that's like the next benchmark. What does the long-term arc look like for your personal financial or your personal business going into the future?
Man, I mean, I didn't think I could get to the spot I'm at now, really, when I started. So it's a little intimidating to think too far out, but goal number one's 100. And after that's 300, then it's 1,000. I want to get to the 1,000 mark. So hopefully I can do that in like 5 years. It's kind of my goal.
Yeah. I mean, the pace that you're going at right now is, again, I've never heard anything like it, just to be totally clear. And for anyone listening, I mean, I'm sure there's people out there, there's plenty of stories. I'm sure, maybe not plenty of stories, but I'm sure there's maybe, a couple out there. What does your team look like to get to 100? Or do you already have your systems laid out for that?
Yeah. I mean, so like you can, whatever your goal is, you can break it down. So if I want 10 deals this year, I have to write, well, okay, let's go back first. If I want 10 deals closed, then I have to probably have 15 in contract or 20 in contract. To have 20 in contract, I probably have to have 100 competitive offers, right? So out of that, how many deals do I have to identify throughout the entire year to have 100 competitive offers that were free or buy box? I don't know, 300, something like that. You got to break it all the way down. Depends on kind of how strict your criteria is. The stricter your criteria is, kind of the harder it is to scale. I don't know, but just break it down to where, like, I have to identify these many deals every week. I have to make these many offers, and it kind of moves everything forward. Um, yeah.
Are you actively tracking those KPIs? Like, hey, these are the number of offers I made this week or this month, um, all that good stuff.
I track things kind of quarterly for now. Maybe when things are more consistent, I'll do it on a shorter time frame. But so far, that's what I'm doing.
Got you. That makes perfect sense. I think you have, like you said, you have a system, you have a path forward here. Especially the fact that you have property management in place is going to be, I think, so instrumental for your growth, because that solves a side of the equation, at least to 100 units, that would otherwise probably be a bottleneck, because managing those three types of entities could be their own thing when you're also responsible for finding the financing and doing all the things that you do to get the properties in a position to where it is a BRRRR, you're tapping into all that equity, you're getting all your cash back and repeating the process. So we've covered a lot for my podcast, a pretty short period of time. I kind of want to open the floor to any other advice that you want to add to investors who are looking to get started in real estate, and then we can kind of wrap up and move on.
Yeah, I would, to start, figure out, is this something that you want to do full time? Or is this something that you already have a job you like, got family, got kids, whatever your situation is, and you're just looking for real estate to kind of be like a place to put money, a place to build some wealth for when you retire? Those are two completely different paths. So like the second path, right? You're going to want to try to focus more on like turnkey properties. Things that are a lot less headaches, a lot less attention in your day. But if you're more of the financial freedom group, as David Green called them when I talked to him, those funny groups of people, I don't know, I'm one of them. So those people, right? You want to suck up as much information as possible. Read a lot of Bigger Pockets books. Read is like Google search top 20 financing books and read all of them. Or listen to them. That's going to help. I don't know. I think if it's real estate, right? I think cold calling helps so much. One of my bigger mentors, his name's Alex. He owns 1,000 units in Ohio, 600 in Columbus. That's a lot. That's like 50 million. It's like 100 million in real estate or something bonkers. And he's like 42. And I cold called him, and he let me into his office because he thought I was working hard and I was trying to learn things, and I met a couple other guys like that. I think another thing is like when people come into my office to try to to meet me or whatever, and they're trying to get into the game, I'll show them how to pull a list and show them how to cold call. And that is a huge, huge like deciding factor if they're going to last in this game, because it's not easy. If you can't consistently call and try to learn and try to find deals for 2 months or a month or whatever the case is, and you give up, it's probably not for you. But if you can handle that, man, keep going.
Again, just an absolutely amazing advice there. The consistency at which you've done these things, and I'm sure that it became all the more real after you got your first deal under your belt through the process that you had gone through. I mean, I'm sure there was like almost like an aha moment, like, holy crap, this thing works. And, how big can it get? So maybe talk about that moment when you realize, holy cow, this thing could actually work. And then when did it all click?
Yeah, that first deal, man, it's scary. There's no other deal that'll ever be as scary as your first one. And like, I had my first, right? But I also work with so many new investors. So I see that moment consistently. If you can just get over that first one, right? Some of the things that can help you build confidence for the first one: build a really good team, agent, right? Having a really good property manager, inspectors, contractors, check their references, the David Green's Core 4, pay attention to that. If you have a really good team you're confident in and you understand the numbers, review the sales comparables, right? Review the rent comparables. If all of that lines up, right, your deal is probably going to go well. And if your first one goes well, man, you're off to the races. I see it all the time. I see people that go from having very little confidence to being like, dude, let's buy like 3 more right now. I'm like, all right, calm it down. But that first one, just got to get over that hump.
I can personally speak to a story of mine where I had two properties that I should have acquired, honestly, probably around the age you are now, and ended up not pulling the trigger on them. And I'm, just now getting into the residential space. So for anyone who is, thinking about pulling the trigger and all the math crunches, but and you have the relationships like you're saying, but you're afraid to just pull the trigger, the highest form of learning is doing, in my book. So like you said, once you do your first deal and get through all the scaries and the unknowns, then your mind starts to wander to bigger things. So well, cool. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Definitely, yeah. Either Josh Janus on Bigger Pockets or Josh Janus on Instagram, and my phone number and email are on there.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. If anyone has listened all the way to the end here, please leave a raving review so we can continue to share inspiration, wisdom, and education to real estate investors to help them build wealth in real estate. All of Josh's contact information will be shared in the description of this video or this podcast, wherever you're viewing or listening to this. We will see you in the next one. Thank you.